I'm Colette Trohan, and I've taken a kind of an interesting path, as so many of you have. I started out as a professional singer, and actually in the military, if you can picture that, in the Marine Corps, and as a soloist and ensemblist. I went from there to Walt Disney World. Any of you who have been to the campground to see the Hoop-Dee-Doo musical review, I did Flora Long and Dolly Drew. Came back up to this area. I was still involved in music, but at that time I decided to become a piano tuner. And the coolest thing I've ever tuned as far as a piano is the White House Eagle Steinway. But I got into some really, really neat places throughout DC. It was during that time I was asked to be the delegate to our national convention. And that's when it really hit me. I just fell in love with meetings. I'm a meeting junkie. The whole process of groups making decisions and getting together and arriving at that decision caught me in 1982, and I've been riding that wave ever since. 30 years worth of consulting, training, teaching, bylaws work, parliamentarian work, professional presiding officer, and then I landed at the Leisure World Board. And I think you know the rest. But that's my story. Michael's got one that's far, far more interesting.
And Colette has told the first lie of the day. I grew up in Southern California, and I came to Maryland in 1984 as a member of the Air Force, stationed in Bolton Air Force Base. But it was more than that. I was a member of the Presidential Honor Guard. So I spent 3 years working at the White House, traveling with President Reagan, spinning a rifle, hanging out with Air Force Thunderbirds, having no real career ambitions other than the next trip. But when I got out of the military, I stayed here, and I went to work at Pepco, where eventually I was running the call center. But I was like most 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds. I was renting an apartment, and HOAs had a bad name. So I said, I'll never live in an HOA. Then I bought a house that was new construction, and you know what comes with that, an HOA. And so I got involved simply because I didn't know. I didn't know how things operated. But one thing I found is our management company was terrible. They were terrible about follow-through. They were terrible about communications. And when I approached them about it before they turned over from developer to homeowner control, they basically told me to mind my business. So I said, okay, I'm going to get on this board for one reason, and that's to fire you. And that's what I did. I was the founding board president of my association. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was probably a bit impetuous and quick to act. But over the first 5 years, we went through 3 different management companies because I expected follow-through. I expected return on the money we were paying for management. And after management company number 3, I got involved in CAI, Community Associations Institute. And I met a guy in Fairfax that was going through the exact same thing. And we said, we're 2 reasonably bright guys. It depends who you talk to, but we're 2 reasonably bright guys. Let's quit our jobs and start a management company. So in 1994, we did exactly that. Fortunately, I had a very supportive wife, who was willing to put up with it for a little bit. But we became not wildly successful. We became very successful. We were managing all the communities that large management companies will manage. The 70-unit townhome communities, the 50-unit condominium associations. And it was important. It was an important part of my career because leaks happen in every association at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. If something happens at the Greens, we have staff to deal with it. Well, our entire portfolio, we had no staff. It was 2 of us. And so if we didn't prevent the leak, we had to go deal with the leak. And so it taught us about being proactive. It taught us about preventative maintenance and proper reserves. It taught us all these fundamental things that help us and put me here today. And so after a while, I got tired of being the big fish in a little pond, and I got approached by Legum& Norman, which at the time I went there was the largest management company in the Mid-Atlantic. And I was the vice president there. And then in 2010, I was approached by Barkin Management to start a new company here. They're native to Boston. And so I was invited, asked, recruited, whichever title you want to give it, to start Barkin's company here locally. And over 15 years, we built it to 57 clients, just over 14,000 units across the DMV. And last summer, the next step in Barkin was to be president. Well, to be president of the company, I either had to move to Boston or commute to Boston 4 days a week. And with a then 14-year-old getting ready to start DeMatha and a wife who has very much entrenched in her career here, that was just a non-starter. So I said, all right, I have a really good 10 years left in my professional career.
Let's hope so.
Can I, well, depends on who you ask. Can I see myself doing the same thing for the next 10 years? And the answer was no. I think I had done everything I could do at Barkin, and I didn't see myself doing it for the next 10 years. And literally the next week, I got contacted about Leisure World. And from the moment I got contacted and I spoke with the recruiter, I was interested in this community. In a typical management company situation, you're judged on your growth. More clients, more unit count, more revenue. Here, you have gates. We have gates. You can't grow. The only thing we can do is be better. So it comes full circle from when we started, where I got involved because I lacked service. And now I'm involved because I think I can bring better service. And so what I've tried to do since I started as around the 100-day mark.
Yep.
I think I'm supposed to give a State of the Union address or something. Our focus is on how do we bring better service. And through those years, I've been on the national board of CAI. I've been on the local chapter board of CAI. I've been on the Association for Professional Community Managers board for CAI. And then I do this all day long. And until March 31st of this year, I was still the board president of my association. And my wife thinks I'm a little crazy sometimes, and that may in fact be true. But I love what I do. And it's 100 days in.
I'm not much more than that.
I love doing what we're doing here. I see promise in things we're doing. I see the interesting thing that brings us today, which is governance, and everybody playing their role in governance. If everybody finds that lane is theirs, and they stay in that lane, things work tremendously better. But anyways, we'll talk about today as the worlds collide. Back to the early 90s when I got involved and I was doing management's job, there's inherently a problem. And so we're here today to talk about that.
One of the interesting things about Michael and I is we have the same boss. We both serve at the pleasure of the Leisure World Corporation Community Board of Directors. And I am well aware of the fact that I'm a lot easier to get rid of than he is.
Exactly.
But we know that that's true, and I think one of the things that is the first time I can tell in Leisure World's history, we have somebody who really gets it, who understands governance, the role of the board, customer service, all of those things. So I'd like to take you back just a little bit to what the heck it is in the governance structure of Leisure World, because I've got news for you. It is unbelievably complicated but interesting. A lot of you know the early history, and there's been some great stuff written. 10 years ago at the 50th anniversary, there were some publications that, if you haven't had a chance to read them, there was a series in Leisure World News that they, I think, at one point compiled together with articles on the history. When Leisure World was first developed, Ross Cortese came in. He had a very strange and interesting idea. He wanted to build all of the amenities first. Then he started building and selling homes. And I believe that's the trigger for Suburban Bank to say, no, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you the financing, but instead of just letting you have the buildings, we're going to put them in a trust. And that trustee is going to be Suburban. So if you go under, we've got this thing covered. And so the trust number 1, as we call it, encompassed a lot of the earliest buildings, the Clubhouse 1, the admin building, and of course now involves the golf course, the building we're sitting in. Those are the common areas, but unlike most organizations, we don't own them as the association. They're in a trust. In the 80s, a couple of things happened. In 1977, Leisure World Community Corporation was created, LWCC. And that's the corporation that does the governance and the management of the whole area. And there's one director from each mutual, except, of course, for the ones that got big. So we have a total of 34 directors on the board representing all of the residents of Leisure World, some from very, very small mutuals and some from pretty darn large ones. Then in 1980, Suburban decided that they were pretty much done. They'd completed everything they needed to do. And so Leisure World Community Corporation became the trustee. So now we have the trustee as the corporation acting with the board of directors. So the board of directors is acting through the mutuals. We need one more layer. So let's now create another corporation, and we're going to call that Leisure World of Maryland Corporation. And that is the arm that does the management. That is the board that Michael is the president of. And we started early this year looking at how we can reconfigure that board to be far more efficient at work. And one of the ideas we had was, since everybody thinks LWNC stands for Leisure World Management Corporation, why don't we talk about maybe changing the name to Leisure World Management Corporation? Through all of that, we have the 29 mutuals that all have their own boards of directors. So the property along inside these gates is every mutual owns and controls the property within their own boundaries. Then everything that belongs to the common areas is owned and controlled by the trust, which is handled through the LWCC Board of Directors. And then we have the management corporation. As Michael will tell you, we have one employee, and that is our CEO. That's who the board hired. And if you've got complaints about any other employees, he's the only one that can do anything about them.
If you have complaints about me, I can do something about that too.
And it's a really interesting, delicate balance. But I think the part that's so much fun for both of us is we already get it. I will say we've had times when the board through the years, and we've got 60 years, right, has done a lot of micromanaging. I will also say without that, this place wouldn't be here. And this time, I am so doggone proud of this board because within the last couple of years, the way they have grown, the way they decided we are going to do this right. And when we engaged in the search starting last summer, we literally first contacted a firm. We contacted many. We finally found the one that was absolutely perfect for us. And then they brought us, we started with 9 separate candidates. And thanks to someone who can't be here today because she's with her family, but Sue Zeicherman was an absolutely awesome chair of the search committee. We had 8 video interviews. We had 4 in-person videos. The board had 2 interviews. And finally, we were able to sign the contract. And Michael started January 5th well, actually December 31st, but he didn't show up. I shouldn't say that because he did. You know, I can't even do that because it's not true. But he began officially in the office on January 5th and began looking at what we gave him. We had him nicely locked in by that time, so he was stuck. And has started to build his team. And I anticipate we'll see some changes as we go by with the LWMC the corporation that hires our employees? What other stuff does LWMC do?
Well, the first thing we do, well, not the first thing, the most recent thing that we've done is we've become an accredited management company through CAI.
That's so cool.
Worldwide, there are only 380 accredited management companies through CAI. It's important because as I got it, as I mentioned, I was on the national board, I was on the local board. So I'm entrenched in CAI. When I got here, I said, all right, we need to make sure everybody has professional credentials, has a career path. We have a succession plan. We have all. I looked up, and every one of our managers has some form of CAI credential. And I said, hey, wait a minute, why are we not accredited through CAI? Well, there were two reasons. My predecessors in this position lacked professional credentials through CAI. But more importantly, they just never applied. And so, sometimes the application process is where you start, and they just never did it. And so I learned on Thursday that we are now an accredited management company through CAI. This is important. My wife, who's also a manager, asked me, she said, why is that important? I said, when you think about it, in the outside world, in my former life, is vitally important because you're competing against management companies that have 1,000 clients. And if you lack the same professional credentials and commitment to ongoing professional education, you fall behind those other management companies. As I mentioned, we have gates. So I'm not marketing against other management companies. I'm marketing against other places you can live. Yeah, I'm starting to think about what's the next step? What's the next group of people who are going to come to Leisure World? How do we make sure that we're the most professional in what we do? Are we going to get every interaction right? No. But this is one of the first steps that we're doing. As Colette mentioned, all the staff report to me. So there's 245 employees that at some level report to me. I have a lot of direct hires. There's too many people that report to me. I've spent the last 100 days telling everybody what we should do or listening to people tell me what we should do. And now I need to start doing what I actually say we're going to do. And so one of those things is fundamental to our success. And that's communicating with you and listening to you. This week, we're rolling out an email tag that will be in every single employee's email. It's asking you to rate every interaction. So if you have an email exchange with a Leisure World employee, there's going to be a link embedded in the email address, in the email body of the email, where you click on it. It'll take you 2 minutes to do it. Your feedback is important. Without your feedback, we don't know where our blind spots are. The other thing we're doing is we're surveying our staff. May 1st, we've engaged, well, not May 1st, we've engaged a company called Intergage to survey everybody independently. So May 1st, an email will be going out to all members of the staff to survey their satisfaction with Leisure World and what we do and how we do. I can tell you we're going to do all these wonderful things, but without the team that works with me and for me, we can't do it. So we need to make sure everybody understands what the mission is. Again, we can't get bigger, we got to get better. And as many of you have heard me say through the interview process and over the last couple months, I'm a firm believer in being better today than you were yesterday. As I mentioned, I have a son who's at DeMatha. There is no bus at DeMatha. I'm the bus. And so every day I drop him off and I tell him, be better today than you were yesterday. Always he asks me, what did I do yesterday? and always I say, I have email, I'll find out. But now it just comes full circle. Now we want staff to be better today than they were yesterday. Now we have email. We're gonna get your feedback. We're gonna take your feedback seriously. Sticking our head in the sand and pretending something doesn't exist doesn't cure it. And so I've spent the last 3 months looking at every process and writing reports at various stages of time to the board on my findings and what we're going to do. So I'm writing the 90-day report now, and I found 5 more things last week that I think I should include in the 90-day report. At some point, it's going to become a book for Leisure World. But it's helpful. You know, Colette talked about it being a difficult structure. I was 2 months into the search process, the interview process, before I understood who I was actually going to be working for. Was it LWCC or LWMC? And we had an email exchange late last week, and I had to pause and go pull up my contract and find out who I actually worked for, because I forgot. But that's just, if Colette and I are living that life every day, and we occasionally have to think about, hey, wait a minute, what entity should be doing X? What entity should be doing Y? I can imagine the confusion that you may have because you're not living it every day. And I think that's why this forum is so helpful, because it helps. You know, do we want to get into the details of trust A or trust B? No, but I think it's important we understand the roles that each play. And so we're doing a lot of things on the management side as Leisure World of Maryland Corporation to help make us a better management company and a better servant to the membership.
I think the other thing I didn't say, speaking of Leisure World of Maryland Corporation, the board of directors of Leisure World of Maryland Corporation is one director from each mutual. And so it's never really done much of anything other than elect the president. People have been saying to me all this time, that board's too big, it's too big. I have always answered, a larger board doesn't need to be just cut down, it needs to work differently. And finally, I had an epiphany sometime last year and realized, you know what, it's not too big to govern, but it's too big to manage. So we aren't giving the president of LWMC a real board of directors they can work with. And the last thing we need is to have 34 people, or 29 out of 34, playing dual roles and trying to do 2 different jobs, because what I'm hoping is that we will get the LWMC configured so that it can do the management. We got a lot of governance stuff to do on the LWCC side. We've got a lot of pieces of this organization, and that's the board that's supposed to really be doing the policy setting, the strategic direction setting, the giving the direction to the CEO and saying, okay, here, run with it. So we started looking at that in January. One of the things we suggested was to take the executive committee of the LWCC board and put them over here and then fill it out with the president and some employees of the president's choosing. If we can get a board that's closer to 15 or so, then they can be doing the things that will help us also, and I think you've all known it and seen it, get rid of the management silos, where this group over here is setting up policies, but we don't see them, and there's another one over here and another one over there, and we can centralize the management, and then we can really take off with the LWCC board and do an awful lot of work with them. They have been working extremely hard. I have to say this, I looked for it briefly, but I couldn't find it. I remember, and I've lived here 15 years, I remember a letter in the Leisure World News from a resident who talked about how embarrassed he was at the Leisure World Board of Directors and how the meetings were people shouting at each other and it was chaos in some of those meetings. And I think of that a lot because we've made some extraordinarily tough decisions in the last 2 years. And by golly, that board has stepped up. I tell them I'm proud of them, but I want to tell you, and they are working at that. But I want to keep them in governance and let's get ourselves putting the management where the management belongs, and then we'll really manage to take off. I think I said that crazy, manage to take off. One thing I want to make sure of is a disclaimer. You know how they always say finances are a snapshot? I'll tell you right, anything I say today, I believe today, but 2 years from now, if you pull up this tape, it may not be the same. My biggest problem, according to my husband, is when somebody asks me what I think, I tell them. And I will. But thinking back, you know, if this is being taped, this is today, and we learn, we grow, we change.
You know, I think that before we get to the question, I think governance and understanding people's role is very simple. It's very basic. Forget the complicated structure of leisure world. The board's role is to govern, to make decisions. This is what we want to do. What's the end result? It's staff's job, my job, to figure out the means. How do we do it? And if you look at if you look at governance and what lane you should be in, that's the easiest way to look at it. Is this the ends question? You know, what is it we want to achieve? Or is it a means? How do we achieve it? If you're, as a board, if you're venturing into how do we achieve it, you're cross-pollinating the governance structure, and the confusion will happen.
Okay, it's an honor and a pleasure to have both of you here. And I think you can tell the level of interest in this session by the number of people that have attended. And they actually got tickets to come so we could have some control over the crowd. So thank you.
Did you take away all the signs?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so the first question is, how will you increase transparency and accountability of your office to the people of Leisure World?
I'm assuming this is for me.
Yes.
You know, I'm a firm believer in communication. Now, you talk to my wife, she disagrees with that assessment. But I think one of the things, I can't just do stuff in a vacuum. I've got to tell you what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do over the last 100 days is over-communicate. I sent a letter out to the community. We'll take a step back. I've been communicating great with the board. Lots of information going back and forth. And at last month's meeting, board members said, hey, there should be more communication going out to the community. So the community knows what you're doing. You know, it's one thing, you know, I'm a firm believer that management reports are really the manager's report card that they get to write. And so I took the time to send a letter to the community to say, hey, here are the things we're working on. And I expect to do that more often. I expected, at least on a monthly basis, if not through the Leisure World newspaper, then through a separate email blast like went out last week, to tell you what we're doing. You know, I don't like to surprise people. And just because I have the authority to do something doesn't mean I do it in a vacuum. And so people, as I look out, I actually can make out faces. Many people have been through my office, and people know that I have an open door policy. I really have a closed door policy. There's an open door policy. If the door is open, come on in. I'll make time to talk. And it's helped me learn where things are. And it's helped me understand what's important to the membership. And so we'll communicate about what we're doing on a continual basis. I can't promise it'll be every week, but it will be frequently. And it will be clear as to what we're doing.
Thank you. Okay. Hello. Our second question is, how can both the board and management improve communications to residents? The 4/10/26 blast about updating our contract information is a perfect example. If something being sent out with little or no context and no thought as to how.
I agree with you. I'm confused as a resident myself by that Yardi. It says update your information with Yardi, but it didn't tell us exactly how.
Something was wrong with that process. As I said here today, something is wrong with that process because I didn't know something was going out until I started receiving emails back. I was, hey, wait a minute, what is this? Like, I understand the importance of updating Yardi and the importance of doing that piece, but I wasn't aware that that communication went out. So one of the things that I think has to happen, if something's coming from my office, then Heather needs to know about it. The individual managers need to know about it because they're the ones that are going to get the questions. And similarly, if something's going out from one of them to the community, if something's going out from our CFO to the community, I should know about it because when I start getting questions, I need to have the ability to answer the questions. Like, I understand the importance of updating Yardi. Something got bogged down with the process. And so we'll talk on tomorrow. I have a one-on-one with Andy each Monday, and we'll talk about the process and where the breakdown happened. Because there's got to be a refinement of that communication.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what is CAI? Mentioned so many times. Not much enthusiasm. I would like to hear what you did to grow your business. It was statistics with no substance. I guess, was it statistics with no substance?
Okay. Well, those are two very, very good questions. So CAI is Community Associations Institute. It's for lack of a better explanation. It's the governing body, the lobbying body for individual managers, for management companies to deal with the common ownership communities, co-ops, condominiums, HOAs. They are a big lobbying force when bills come up before local legislatures in either helping support those bills because they benefit associations, in your case mutuals, or opposing legislation because they're detrimental to those bodies. So it's very important. And as you look around, as you navigate your career as a management company executive, if you don't have professional designations, for example, I have 3 professional designations. I have CMCA, which is Certified Manager of Community Associations. I have AMS, which is Association Management Specialist. And then I have the highest designation, which is Professional Community Association Manager. So if you look at it, if you take just those 3 designations, CMCA is your high school diploma. AMS is your college degree. And PCAM, the last one, is your doctorate degree, if you will. There's a whole thesis that you have to do, whole case study that you have to do. So they're the governing body. There's a code of ethics. It explains the fiduciary obligation I have to you and how we operate. But in order to grow a management company, in order to grow professionally, you just have to have those designations. The designation we just got, which is our AAMC, which is Accredited Association Management Company, is the highest designation for a management company, which is in essence what LWMC is. So how did I grow my other businesses? I've successfully run 3 different management companies. The most recent one, I started off in a Regis office space with a phone and a computer, 0 clients, February 1st, 2011. I was told, take what I know and take what we do, we being Barclay Management, and find a way to do it better, which aligns with my thought process. And so it's about reputation in the industry. It's about marketing and how are we going to do better. Because I can tell you we're going to do A, B, C, and D. If I don't have the staff to help me do A, B, and C, we're going to fail. If I tell you we're going to do A, B, C, and D, and we don't do it, then we fail. I was fortunate early in my career to go through Ritz-Carlton training. And with Ritz-Carlton, they say, if you touch it, you own it. And so what that meant was, not that you solved every problem. If Colette, as a resident, came to me and said, the wallpaper, is a perfect example. The sound system in the meeting rooms at the admin building are terrible. I got to solve it. Now, am I an acoustical engineer? No. But I have to go find one. I have to find the company that installed the sound system and have them on the case. Now, do I actually have to make those phone calls and find the people? No, I have staff to do that. But it's my job to report back to Colette as to what we do because I own it. You know, I believe in the concept of me. And that's not to pat myself on the back, although I'm very capable of doing that. But if somebody asks somebody at Vantage Point East, who's responsible for this? I expect Chris to say it's me because she's the manager. If somebody asks Heather that exact question, who's responsible for this? The same thing. I expect her to say me because she supervises Chris, or at least she's in partnership with Chris. So similarly, if it gets to me, who's responsible? Well, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm the last desk. So I've got to make sure it gets done. And so how did I successfully grow a company? I made sure I didn't overpromise and underdeliver. That's hard sometimes, particularly when you don't control every aspect of what's going on in the operations. But reputation is a lot. Commitment in time is a lot. And really understanding that every business out here is involved in the service industry. You're providing some level of service. And if you don't do it, someone's going to get on the board for one reason. That's to fire me. I'd rather not have that conversation.
Okay. The next question says PPD as an organization is not making a profit. Annual contracts are prohibitively expensive. PPD delivered services are priced comparably to outside firms, but outside firms do not make homeowners wait weeks to solve urgent problems. Quality of service delivery is inconsistent. Can you outline what steps are being taken to fix PPD?
Did Warren write that question? The first thing I saw when I looked at Leisure World's setup was PPD. And running a management company, I've always said, whoever can perfect that is going to make a lot of money. And then when I found out over the first 30 days, we wasn't making a lot of money, wasn't making any money. Oh, that's not true. Made money, just wasn't making enough money to cover expenses. I was blown away. You have a captive audience. You're a 5-minute ride away from any place. And I kept hearing about this mysterious 3-week wait. And they made me wait 3 weeks, and then they came and then they turned down the business. And as a businessman, I said, what do you mean they turned down the business? We're not making money and you're turning away business? So they started looking at staffing. I met with PPD as the team, the leadership team, and talked about reputation. You know, how did I grow company? Reputation. Why do people not use PPD? Reputation. I looked at the staffing and I talked to a couple people and they told me that in 1991, the community was half built. Every one of the trades had at least 8 members on their team. And it was half the community. Now you have trades that have 2 or 3 people and a foreman who's been promoted because of tenure as opposed to leadership abilities, doing work instead of leading work. And so my question to Anthony and to the team was, do we have a people problem in that we can't get the right people doing the work day to day? Or do we have a leadership problem in that we don't have leadership capable of leading down a path? Well, part of the problem is something we've heard about today already. That's lack of transparency. The top leadership at PPD had no idea what they were making or what they were spending. And you can't run a business without understanding the cost of goods and productivity. There's lots of stuff you have to know, but if you don't have visibility in that, it's hard. And so we've started providing Anthony with that visibility in terms of what the department is doing. We started hiring better. We just hired a new master electrician, and we're looking to hire a new master HVAC technician. And so we're hiring better. But I'm pushing Anthony. I'm pushing the department. We're going to make money this year. And it's because we're putting process to things. We're providing, we're expecting accountability. I think that's part of the main thing. We're looking at productivity. How long was a truck sitting in spot A idling without somebody in it? And sometimes you have to micromanage to get things correct. I'm not a micromanager, so I'd rather get things correct sooner than later. But in a perfect world, what I want is if you call PPD today, I want somebody today to go triage that job. It may still take a couple weeks to order a part or whatever the case may be, but I want somebody to look at it that day. We're not quite there. We're going to get there.
Colette, in working with the two research firms to recruit our two GMs/presidents, can you tell us if there is a difference in what you were looking for? The second question was, what were the highlights of Michael's resume?
Oh, boy.
This is where I can pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
That's
I've watched this community and this board of directors grow, and I mean by knowledge and sophistication. I can remember complaining about things early on, and someone would say, well, welcome to Leisure World, or that's Leisure World, and we accepted that. I think the board, if you think back, if you've been here any tenure at all, in the first, I'm not sure how many years, right up until about even 80s, as things began to move over, and there's people who know this story far better than I do, but the place was being managed by the construction companies. It wasn't actually coming together as one great big happy thing. We had a manager that was really excellent, and we've got a lot of the record keeping from that. My mantra right now is knowledge management. I don't believe that we've got a good, solid system for maintaining our records. We have to have that because that's our wisdom for people to be able to go back through and see it and learn. We then had a manager here for 27 years. Most of you remember that. So the board was not used to doing anything like what we're talking about now. They really weren't leading with governance. They were allowing the manager to do it. So the first time the board had really done, ever, a search was 5 or so years ago. I came in on the very tail end of that search. I think they did the very best they could with what they had to work with. We learned a lot. We learned a lot of things not to do during that time frame. I would say we made a big mistake not being proactive enough when that contract ended and let it go a while too long before we acted. And I take part of that responsibility, and I think that the board really learned a lot from that as well. Once we made the commitment to do it right, and that means spend money. That means don't try to find the best person in the world for half of what the salary is that they would expect. I was just thinking I could really tease him and say we were willing to pay twice as much and watch his face, but we didn't. We weren't. So we had to first grapple with the reality of this is going to cost money. And if you say that the salary is X number, a good search firm, ballpark, are going to charge you about 1/3 of that amount to do the search. So once we accepted that this, instead of saying let's do the cheapest thing we can possibly do, which has been the Leisure World way, let's face it, we said let's do it right. And it was that commitment to doing it right that really turned everything. We went through, I cannot tell you how many different search firms. I've always said that they have to have what I've called the nonprofit mentality. I finally realized what it was. and why so many people didn't fit our mold is because we are, in the nonprofit world, we call it member-driven. We are owner-driven. We take our ownership very seriously. We want to be involved. We want to be informed. And a lot of managers you're going to look at don't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear anything about it. So we finally found a management company. It was purely by accident. It just happened that our CFO mentioned that he knew these people. It's actually kind of a funny story. So he said, maybe they'll talk to you about how to find the right management firm. So we said, that's great. We had a call with them. We didn't realize till the end of the call, they thought they were being interviewed for the job. So we were doing this thing. It was just completely crazy. And so we set up another call because we began to see a spark. It's a company with two people, Bart and his daughter, Leslie. And the guy's been around for a long time, and he knows a lot of people, and he knows what he's doing. So he first decided he needed to learn about Leisure World. And he tackled it. He understood us better than anybody I could even imagine. He took the job that seriously. In fact, he kind of fell in love with us, and he said he was going to miss us. And occasionally, he used to call Sue Zeikerman and say, I need my Sue fix, just to talk. He's so interested in our community. So he took it seriously and started looking for people that would fit. Well, there were different categories, and when he went into property manager type people, many of them had that mentality of, this is my job, go away. And you could tell that through the interview process. Also, we had somebody who guided us every step of the way. He talked to us, he wrote interview questions for us. He said, we're going to make sure that everybody is treated exactly the same. And when we finished with the first 8, we didn't know how many were going to emerge. There was such a break between the top 4 and the bottom 4. So we started looking at that next 4. And as I said, we brought each one of them onto the campus. We gave them a tour, we talked to them, we had an interview with them, and it naturally broke that there were only 2. So we took the 2 to the board. But every step along the way, we learned a little bit more about what was going to fit and what their emphasis was. I'll tell you another secret that I've said to too many people already, but we got these resumes, and I took one look at this resume. Nonprofit experience, he gets it. President of his community association, he understands governance. Oh, and did I mention on his resume it said he led a transition into Yardie and out of Yardie? And you know, all of these pieces, well, Sue Zeikerman and I just looked at it and said, oh my. And Bart said, do not fall in love with a resume. And Sue and I said, it's too late. It just continued to where, what were we? We needed somebody who would get us. And he needed something to do for the next 10 years. So it was just always a fit. And at one point, the only time I was worried he was going to screw up in front of the search committee is when he said, look, your search is over. I'm your guy. And I thought, he says, I want this job. It's perfect for me. I'm perfect for you. So we had an extraordinary, great experience. And when it comes time to do this again, I hope we can keep track and build on that. But we are about to just plain take off beyond what we've ever been able to do before because of the people that we have in place. I'm just ecstatic. I'm so excited. So that's what we did.
The next question is, when will Leisure World create and approve a strategic plan? Mission, vision, value statements, strategic goals. And what is your vision for Leisure World in the next 10 years?
To do all of that. I am critical of the strategic plan that seems to be in place. I've done strategic planning with clients, and it's a hard work. What I've always seen as a strategic plan, what I've seen come out of it, is it's a contest, first of all, to see how many flip chart sheets you can put around the room. And we go through the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. When I was working on my master's in nonprofit management, I got a whole different picture of actually what that SWOT analysis is. But then we say, okay, all this stuff is great. Let's make that our strategic plan. And that's where we blow it. I thought when I read the one that had been done, it wasn't enough depth of the board itself. The board has been too busy looking at managing because we had to survive. So my whole purpose in trying to get some of these other pieces aligned is so that we can start digging back into some serious strategic planning. That requires strategic thinking. And we have a lot of tactical thinkers who do things in projects, but getting that big picture, that's a whole different set of brain cells. One of the things we don't have that has to feed into that, if you're going to talk about my vision for the next 10 years, is we don't have deep enough benches. We need leadership development. We need to help people understand committees and mutuals, how to run meetings, how to do different things, and get them so that we don't have somebody that says, I'm on the board because nobody else wants to do it. We've got to get you giving us a whole lot better stuff. Then we have to start getting into strategic planning is really about priorities. Where do we want to be? And if we figure out what we want to be, and I think we want to be an extraordinarily successful community where people are just dying to get in here, who are willing to pay to get in, we are so competitive we can name our own price to get in, where we've got it so well figured out. But there comes a time when you have to know what the priorities are. You want to be the best? Don't go cheap. You can't do it. So you decide where those priorities are going to be. Far too often in the past, Leisure World has chosen the cheap path. We don't want to raise our condo fees. I've had lots of clients in the Southwest DC area, Southeast, on the Potomac River, buildings that were built during World War II. Some of those people moved in not long after. They wanted to keep their condo fees low. So now they find themselves with DC taxes and with buildings that have to be renovated, and the property value is exploding. They can't afford to live in the buildings. I've seen lots of properties where they couldn't take care of them because the board wanted to be friendly and not raise the condo fees. What we want is going to cost money. We have to make the commitment. If we don't want that, if we just want to be mediocre, tell me early because I'm moving. But we have to choose where those priorities are and how we're going to do it. This was a community. I will never forget this debate where the board of directors went absolutely crazy on whether or not we should add internet to our cable contract. And the people saying, we will never use it. I'm not paying for something that somebody else is going to use. What would this place be if there had not been community-wide internet when COVID hit? It still gives me nightmares. We were so lucky that somebody saw that and said in the beginning, even though there were a lot of naysayers and said, I'm not going to use it, it's not about whether or not I'm going to use it. It's about what's best for the community and what can we build that we can be proud of. I'm passionate about that, sorry.
All right, those were good. Now we're going to give you perhaps a few more difficult ones.
Oh, boy.
When staff management is not responding to residents' needs, what is their recourse for bringing up issues? Number 2, what can be done to maximize resident participation in a positive way to share ideas that are not being addressed?
I'll deal with the first one, you deal with the second
Well, sure.
one. Just as I have an open door policy and people can contact me, if somebody fails to respond, if somebody responds inappropriately, again, my desk is the last desk in the chain. I want to know about it. Starting this week, there's going to be a link in every email so you can put your feedback into that link. I receive every single response that gets submitted. And I will make sure that responses go back to, well, you can be anonymous. You can submit a survey without telling us who you are. But if you want a response from me, I'd hope you put your name and contact information. I'll have your contact information. I'll make sure you get a response. We have to be responsive to the needs of the people that we work for. And so that's the first piece. Could you read the second piece one more time?
Sure. What can be done to maximize resident participation in a positive way to share ideas that are not being addressed at the moment?
Well, it depends on where they're not being addressed. One of the first questions, we were going through the interview process. I came up here one Sunday and just drove through the community and looked at things. And by email back to Sue and the recruiter was, I see disrepair, I see opportunities. What role would my office play in resolving those issues? And I got the answer that I give when I do board training, when I do manager training. It depends on what the documents say. So if your issue, not your issue, but if the issue is a mutual issue, meaning something is not happening in the mutual level, I play no role in that governance. That doesn't mean I don't have conversations and say, hey, you should reach out to Pat, or you should reach out to Colette, you should reach out to Warren. Whoever you should reach out to, they can assist you. And so I can help facilitate those conversations. I'm having a conversation tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon with a board member at a mutual who doesn't think things are going right in that mutual. Do I play any role in changing how things go? No. But if I can facilitate a conversation and make a conversation more of a conversation as opposed to a confrontation, I'm happy to assist, because at the end of the day, it's resolving an issue that somebody has. I can't personally fix every issue, but I can help facilitate conversations. If it's something on our level, it's something on a trust level, then I have more authority to do things. The documents give me the authority to do those things. So it really comes back to, where does the issue lie? Who has responsibility for taking an action to fix it?
I think most people know that they can go to their mutual. I think what people don't know is when there's something wrong at Leisure World, the way it's working, they're not sure where to go. One of the questions that comes up, one of the really great things about Leisure World is you have people living in houses that cost $195,000. You have other people living in houses that nowadays cost $900,000. We all are together. And as you pointed out, Colette, not you were talking about someplace else, but some people are now finding they cannot afford to live in Leisure World. And so that's a problem that many of us are seeing our neighbors having to leave. And so this is one of those kinds of problems that we don't know where to go to.
It is a balancing act. I used to manage a building in Baltimore, right in the Inner Harbor. And the board president, first day, he goes, the first thing you have to understand about this building is we're a building of millionaires and a building of 100aires. And you've got to balance the service delivery to meet the needs of everybody. And what you do is you present a budget that makes economic sense. You know, how do we manage this $40 million structure? And once you deal with the infrastructure and you have that down, you're doing the preventative maintenance, you're doing reserves, what you need to do, then you start getting into wants. You know, how do we improve things? You know, for Leisure World as a whole, right now, what I'm looking at is the foundation. How do we fix the foundational issues so that we can move to the aspirational issues of a strategic plan? And what are the next steps? But I have to take into account that wide range of people that you discussed. And it is not one size fits all. And it's trying to find a balance.
And just to piggyback on that a little bit, because I hear this a lot, and then I want to come back to committee involvement and stuff. We can solve a lot of things, but we can't fix personal financial issues. What we can do is find resources and help for that, but there's a place at which we can't do it. We have to recognize that we have to also have our own survival as well. That we've got to find that happy medium. It's not all one way or all the other way. But other ways of being involved, we have our committees that have some incredible experts involved in them. And people are, although we have the expertise, which is what you were saying earlier, the people who are just know so doggone much about the different fields, your residents are always welcome to join in on those meetings, to sit in on them. The schedules are always announced, the Zooms are always announced. Maryland has an incredibly transparent act, the Open Meetings Act. And there is an opportunity at the end of every board meeting, at the end of every committee meeting, for residents to come and give their feedback and talk about these things. So the committee should be taking in some of that feedback. One thing we've not done much of, and I'm really looking forward to it, is leveraging technology. Because somebody has an idea that gets lost, if we can start figuring out a way to harness that. But again, just because I have this idea and I think it's perfect, that doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. I'm not always going to get my way. I learned that one early on.
Okay, now to some nitty-gritty. What are the plans for fixing the problems at the Norbeck Gate?
I knew that was coming. Actually, we've got lots of them. In fact, the person who's mostly in charge of that's sitting not too far away from me. But that, one of the things I did was I kind of changed up the board meeting schedules. And already we need to meet twice a month. We have our regular board meeting at the end of the month, and the day that has always been reserved for the executive committee meeting, which is the Friday 11 days before, we are using that morning as a work session. Come get involved with this one on Friday morning at 9:30. The entire morning work session is on something called the Norbeck Gate. And Jim Rudnick, our Director of Security, will be starting with all of the security issues involved. And then Warren Lupson, who wishes he hadn't sat so close to the front, will take us through. There's a whole lot more to it than what it looks like. I keep hearing people saying, oh, all we have to do is this, residents only, or non-residents only, or close the gate, or whatever. There's a ton of these things, but as soon as we take one path, Montgomery County and the state of Maryland say, oh, and you need this permit for that, and this study for that, and this permit for that. So we've got to, first of all, figure out if we can do it. Something just surfaced a couple of weeks ago as a possibility. We've got to find a path that's going to solve these needs, because there's nothing perfect other than not having to get any permits at all or do any kind of that stuff. And we'll make a choice, and then we'll start working on it. But we are going to look at all of the options, and that's an open meeting, and the Zoom links will be out very soon. Tuesday the agenda goes out, but the whole thing is Norbeck Gate.
The next one, first, a compliment to the management for the recent communications to the Leisure World community. Next is...
That's all I get.
Earn it.
Okay. It goes on pretty nicely.
Be careful, you don't want to give him too much.
From your vast previous experience in management, what surprised you, both good and bad, when you completed your first 90 days at Leisure World?
What surprised me? First of all, I'm not one that, the 34-person board did not concern me at all. And I told my wife, I said, there's a 34-person board. She's like, they're going to drive you crazy. I said, they're not. Just one person will drive me crazy. No, what surprised me was the lack of organization, the lack of a succession plan, the fact that this seat sat open for a year, effectively. They told me there was not a succession plan. When I looked at the different departments and I looked at who was heading the different departments, not universally, not totally, but many of those promotions were because of tenure. And so when you do that, the person then has an internal struggle to stop doing the work and start leading the work. And it leads to things getting bogged down. And so things were just bogged down. And it's a $30 million a year budget. And we don't have time for things to be bogged down. And then I saw non-management people making management decisions. I saw, I mentioned staying in lanes. I saw people veering from the lanes they were supposed to be in. I saw committees. I saw staff working. One of the leisure world's famous words that will go down in infamy with leisure world is silo.
Yep.
Everybody was doing their thing, but nobody knew what the other person was doing. So we've started. We've had our first joint meeting between management and accounting, because I was listening and hearing, well, accounting messed this up, and then accounting would say, well, management messed this up. Let's put everybody in the same room. Let's find out who messed up what and try to fix it. And so it was that lack of organization that I was surprised at. When you look at the size of this community, the complexity of this community, it needs somebody pointing the ship in the right direction. And I think that was the thing that surprised me on the bad side. The thing that surprised me on the good side was the activity of this community. This is a vibrant community. And my wife, we sit out back when the weather's nice. Now that it's been nice a couple of days, we're sitting on the patio and drinking a glass of wine just Friday. And she said, I have to tell you something. She goes, I don't want you to get offended. I said, we're married. What am I going to get offended about? I said, you're going to tell me something I don't want to hear? She goes, no. She goes, I see an energy in you that I didn't see at Barkin at the end. And I attribute that to the energy that's here. I'm invigorated every day I come here. And I see people walking. I see the activity of the committees. I see the traffic in and out of my office.
You asked for it.
I did ask for it. I did ask for it. But your energy as a community is going to ensure your success. My job is to capture that success. And every community should emulate your committee structure and the vibrancy of that structure, because that becomes your succession plan for board positions. And if we just get everybody, if I can get every community thinking like that, I'd be an expert at what I do.
As a sociologist, I cannot do anything but totally agree with you. Great answer.
Thank you.
Okay, next one. What leisure world organization is responsible for the maintenance of the green space, including the stream that runs behind VPW and along the golf course? The concerns include trash, dead trees, and other difficulties.
LWCC.
It's trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did my
It's-
first
it's
tour of the
landscape.
golf course on Wednesday last week. I'm a golfer. That was the first time I was on the golf course because of the weather. And I immediately wished I was back inside because it was cold. But I saw the broken pipe. I saw the drainage issues that need to be addressed. I saw the fallen trees that need to be removed. And so it's one of those things that attention needs to be paid. And so there's trust property. LWCC is responsible for that.
Not, But we give it to you to do.
But you didn't give it to me to do it. Ends means.
Right, right. Fix it.
And so, you know what that really means? Spend money.
Yeah.
But we had to be wise about spending money. And so I've had my first tour. It will not be the last tour. But I am aware of those issues, and I have several questions for Richard and company.
And just to piggyback just a little bit with the LWCC part, this is part of those silos as well that I've been ranting about as far as the physical plant and property is different people have sort of taken ownership of those things. Is that landscaping? Is that golf? What is it? And that's part of the puzzle that Michael is trying to put together. Because to me, physical property is physical property, and physical properties better be involved, and not the activity that takes place within that physical property. But I don't get to say that with any authority because that's not my lane. I just make suggestions.
Here's a
And my mother raised an idiot. It just wasn't me.
Here's a different one. Leisure World is a 55 and older community, something that does not seem to be recognized by Leisure World. We need to recognize this younger community. How might we do that? The younger age group, I think what they're saying is that perhaps the 70 and older get more recognition and the 55 to 65 don't.
So I think we need to even be paying attention to a different market as well. I've talked a lot about succession plans. As I was going through the interview process, we talked about marketing. We talked about marketing within. We talked about marketing outside the gates. And so my initial thought was, why would we market outside the gates? But then I realized after I got here, wait a minute. We need a succession plan for residents too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we want to get the highest property, first rule of management, protect property values. Second rule, enhance property values. That means making it a competition for sales. And so we should start marketing to people when they turn 50 to say, here's a place for you when you turn 55. Whereas I went through the interview process, so somebody asked me, I forget who it was, why I never once mentioned the age of the community in terms of residents. It's because, in my mind, that's irrelevant to my discussion. I'm trying to enhance the property values for everybody here and provide the best level of service for everybody here. And that includes taking care of the infrastructure. It includes putting structure to management, all the things that I do. The fact that it's 55 and older doesn't resonate with me because I'm older than 55. I can live here. But we have to market to everybody. And so there are going to be different marketing plans for each age group, you know, not narrowly. We're not marketing to you because you're 70 to 80. We're not doing that. We have to have programs recognizing the type of community it is, but we also have to market to people that aren't ready to live here. And what happens, how do we get them here? And then when people move out, how do we maximize the value of the home they're trying to sell?
This one's a different one. It says, we are hearing a lot about what's happened in the past. I think that was as we began to speak. You began to speak. But now, what are the 3 most important changes, both of you, that you will implement at Leisure World in addition to transparency?
You know, I think it's important that we recognize the past. If we don't learn from the past, we'll trip over it as we try to change the world. And so we have to understand how we got from A to B. I've spent the last 90 days doing exactly that, is learning how Leisure World got to where we are in 2026. Do I know where everything is buried? No, I don't know where everything is buried, but I don't necessarily need to know where everything is buried. Structurally, I see problems that need to be fixed. and we're moving to correct those things in terms of succession plans, in terms of basic policies, in terms of how we interact. But the main thing, the number one thing that I'm doing right now is I'm a believer I have two clients, those that pay us and those that we pay. Without taking care of the ones we pay, we can't provide the service to the ones that pay us. And so we're determining employee satisfaction. There will be a survey that incorporates resident satisfaction. But I need to find out where 245 people's mindset is now and create a culture of service so that we can then provide better service to the residents of Leisure World. And so my number one priority in terms of putting structure to things is really gauging what we're doing from a company standpoint to ensure that the staff we have a meaningful relationship with the entity they spend a third of their life with, and well, a third of their time each year.
Mhm.
I want people working here and coming here with the same energy I come here every day with. I want people smiling. As I walk in the office every day, I see the same people walking up and down the hall. I make a point to talk to every single person I see and say, hi, how's the family? What did you do? I want to create a culture where people want to be here. And I think that's the most important piece that I can do right now.
It's interesting that you said the change that I'm going to do. I started out by saying I serve at the pleasure of the board. And so my job isn't to institute change. I really take this very seriously. My job is to make sure that the board has everything it needs. It has the information it needs. It has the discussion it needs to have in order to reach the best decision. There's a book that was out in the 90s called The Wisdom of Crowds. If you haven't read it, get a hold of it. It's unbelievable on how that group, the larger group, will actually always arrive at the right condition, at the right decision, provided it has the information it needs. If there's one thing I'd like to change, it's actually okay, two. I want to see more board development. I want to see more board training, more board ability to, because we are not professionals. Okay, I am, but nobody else is. They've got to start getting the skill to be able to direct the CEO of a $30 million company. That's not something you just do on a part-time basis. You really have to start building up and learning. One of the other things that we have got to hopefully turn around is a culture piece with the residents. I'm hoping that when residents see something, their first call is to me or to Michael or to somebody to say, hey, what's the real story? Instead of, oh my gosh, do you know what these people are doing? Let's call a lawyer. And we've had that. And I'm not going to say they shouldn't have, because there's been some sleazy stuff that's gone on in this community over the years. So making that culture turn around to where we communicate with one another. And if we still have disagreements, okay, fine, do whatever. But let's get the full story first. Let's make sure that the board has all the information they need and have the time that they need to make the decisions that are so important to this community. Because our responsibility as a board has not really been fulfilled. And we've been too busy with too much other stuff. I want to get the noise out of the way and get really seriously back to business for the board.
Okay, thank you very much.